Holy shike, let's talk about pigs. Here's your host of the Pork Podcast, Jennifer Shike.
There's just something about the story behind the story. And as a storyteller, I'm always searching for ways to give readers just a little bit more. And that's what the Pork Podcast is all about, bringing you stories of the people and the progress of the pork industry. I'm Jennifer Shike. Let's go find just a little bit more.
Well, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that stock show moms can't be put into a box. Whether you're the mom who can feed pigs better than anybody else in the barn, or whether you're the mom who can feed kids better with the best snacks, it takes all kinds of stock show moms to make this thing work. When it came time to talking about what it's like to be a stock show mom, I thought there was no one better to bring into the conversation than one of my dearest friends, Emily Spray. Not only has she been a backup mom to my kids over the years, but she's also been a tremendous role model and mentor to them. And most importantly, she loves my kids like they're her own. And quite frankly, there's nothing that I could be more grateful for in life than to have a friend like that. I'd like to welcome you to the Pork Podcast, Emily.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Those are really kind words. And I always tell my kids, you become like those you surround yourself with. And I've said it a million times, but Jennifer, I am truly so glad that the show pig industry has brought our families together, because I just think the world of you. And, you know, we always need friends that hold us accountable and point us back to what's most important and remind us of the big things, to keep the big things to big things. And Jennifer, you've always been that friend to me. So I'm so thankful for you and thankful to be here.
Well, I'm honored to have you here. And when I first thought of some of the ideas for this podcast, I thought we need to talk about what it's like to be a stock show mom, because I think one of the blessings of our friendship is that we've always been able to be quite real with each other. So we're planning on being real today. Whether this is a good thing or not, I don't know, but here we go. You know, I can't even remember when we first met. Do you remember when we first met?
I remember the first time I heard your name, Jennifer. Our family was showing at the CPS show for the first time. And Craig had said, hey, did you see that picture Jennifer Shike took? And I said, no. And who is Jennifer Shike? And it was a picture that you had taken of my daughter, Michaela. And she had whatever place the yellow ribbon was. She had a yellow ribbon and she was wearing a yellow shirt and she had a yellow bow in her hair. And I just remember thinking in that moment, wow, that was really kind, because I don't even know who this mom is. And she took a picture of my daughter and also went to the trouble to share it with my family. So it was something that we would have. And I just remember the kindness of that moment. And I will never forget. That's the first time that I heard your name.
Oh, well, that makes me laugh, because my husband will say, you shouldn't take pictures of other people's kids. That's weird. And I'm like, but they're so cute, you know, and I would want someone to do this for me. And so
I'm glad you did.
Oh, I love it. Well, you know, we share similar backgrounds in that we were both horse kids, kind of products of the horse industry. I mean, we showed some other things as well. But talk to me a little bit about your path to getting to where you are today. How did you land yourself as a stock show mom in the pork industry?
Sure. Like you said, I grew up in the horse industry. We had horses growing up. And so it was always, and everything was in the horse arena. And, you know, I tell my kids that story of, you know, when I was a 4-H'er, I don't think I ever watched a Grand Drive. I don't think I ever watched a Supreme Showmanship contest. I know I never stepped a foot in the pig barn. We were just always in the horse barn. And so, you know, it wasn't until Craig and I met and started dating, you know, in our 20s that I was actually in the pig barn for the very first time. And so, you know, I tell people, you know, I was drafted into show pigs through my husband. And so I've kind of just grown up through the show pig industry alongside my kids, because like I said, we just always did the horse thing growing up. So that's still where my passion lies. So we kind of, you know, juggle a lot of different hats in our barn. But yeah, I kind of came into the stock show world through my husband, Craig.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't know about you, but I do remember having been predominantly a horse kid. I did show sheep growing up, and I also showed pigs for a little while when I was getting older. I was also very engaged in horse judging and livestock judging. And I remember when it came time for Dan and I to talk about, okay, what are we going to show? What will the kids show? I remember it being a little challenging at first, just because my heart was in the horse industry, but his heart was in the livestock industry. I guess or else maybe I should just say not in the horse industry. But we both agreed on one thing. We agreed that no matter what we do, we need to make sure that we try to do it together as a family. And sure enough, Olivia, our oldest, loved horses and she loved pigs. So she made that kind of fun for us because we were able to do both of those things. But we also made that choice that we're going to try to do this all together and not just be Dan go here with this kid and I go here with that kid. What did that look like for you guys? How did you decide what type of animals that you would have in your barn or what types of species you would show?
Sure. I love that question. And, if I'm honest with you, I always kind of cringe a little bit when somebody walks up to my kids and says, which do you like better, horses or pigs or sheep or whatever it is? Because I feel like in that moment, a kid has to choose what the right answer is. And I tell my kids, there's really no right answer because they are so different. The reason you like showing pigs is so unique to the show pig industry. And it really can't be compared to the lessons that you're learning when you're riding horses or when you're showing sheep or when you're playing basketball. They all have different lessons that can be taught to our kids. And so I guess when our kids were little, Craig and I had that conversation like you did of, what are we going to do that we can do together? And I'm not ever saying there's a right way to parent because I sure haven't figured it out. But we had seen other families, where the mom was gone every weekend with the travel volleyball with her daughter. And, the husband was at the travel baseball tournaments with the son. And the third kid was just, the tag along. And so, we decided when they were young, whatever we chose to do, we wanted to try to do it as much as we could together as a family. And so when we were going to horse shows, we were all at horse shows. When we were going to pig shows, we were all at pig shows. And as the kids have grown up, once they get to those teenage years, they start finding their own interests and what they enjoy best. And so it looks different now than it did when they were young, but we always just try to make the effort to, all be there as often as we can. And there are certainly weekends that we have to divide and conquer. But, as much as we can, we just try to make it a priority in our family to do it together.
Well, I'm going to get ugly real here in this conversation today, I think.
I can do ugly.
One of my, I think, strengths, but also weaknesses is that I am competitive, in case you didn't know that. And I don't know about you, but I remember when our kids were little and we were just getting into the show, the stock show industry and going to some of our first shows. I really just wanted to be the perfect stock show mom. I thought, well, if I just do this like her and I do that like her and I do this like her and I never do that like her, I'm gonna be a pretty good stock show mom. And there's even awards. Do you know you can win awards for being like the best stock show mom or the best show mom? I thought, ooh, that'd be great to win an award like that. And I've never won that award, and that's okay. But I've quickly learned that there is no such thing as a perfect stock show mom. And there's no such thing as a perfect mom. And that the reason that I can be, I can just strive to be the best that I can be for my kids, but I'm not going to be like the best, whatever you want to call it, that there is no such thing as that. And I think that I'm just like, oh, Emily, you're just you're a perfect mom. You're everything's perfect. But I think that it's easy for all of us to just see the highlight reel of what your mom life looks like or what someone else's mom life looks like. And so, I learned pretty quick that, okay, there's no perfect stock show mom. So get that out of your mind. And that was valuable for me to figure out. And though I still wish I could be better as a mom every day, I've come to realize that perfect and best isn't maybe possible when it comes to this area. What do you think about that topic? How does that strike you? Any advice that you may have for somebody who is kind of warring with that belief that they could be that?
Sure. I mean, I think that's so common in any travel, in any place of life. But I kind of think I compare this to a field of wildflowers, and if you're driving along the road and you see a field of wildflowers, you see the beauty in all the different colors. There's random, there's no symmetry in a field of wildflowers. And so your first instinct is to say, wow, look how pretty that is, but there's also a lot of weeds in that patch. There's a lot of weeds, there's a lot of bugs, there's probably a lot of gnats, and I think the same can be said, for any of us moms. You can look and see all the great things that there's doing or the outside beauty, or they look like they have it all put together. Their kids are always behaving. They have cooked home baked cookies that they're bringing to the show every week. And the reality of it is there might be a lot of weeds in their patch too. There might be a lot of things that you don't know about that's happening on the other side. Maybe they're having problems in their marriage, or their kids are struggling with something that you have no idea about. So it's really easy to just judge someone by what you're seeing on the outside, but none of us know what we're doing. And I guess that's that's really the advice, is that none of us know what we're doing. I've never been a mom to a 18, a 15, and a 13-year-old before. I'm doing it for the first time. And I think to just always look for, the advice that was given to me when my kids were younger, when they were toddlers, was to always look for that mom that's in the season ahead of you. So, find a mom with teenagers and sit down and have coffee with her and talk with her and just talk about the things that she's going through in that next season ahead of you. And that was really valuable for me, because when you're in the thick of it and you're in the weeds and you can't see, beyond one day to the next, it's helpful to have somebody who's already kind of paved that path ahead of you, that you can kind of search from their knowledge. And just kind of gain that wisdom from an older mom. So I think, that's a piece of advice that I've always kind of held to. The other thing I always cling to is Galatians 6:9. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due time we'll reap a harvest if we don't give up. And, if that doesn't say motherhood, I don't know what is, because, it's day after day. We're weary. We're not seeing the end result. We're not seeing the, the end goals yet, but we just have to keep doing one day at a time. Just putting one foot in front of the other. So
I love that you bring up weary because, for a lot of us who, we're taping this at a show. I guess I should have brought that up, huh? We're here at the National Junior Summer Spectacular. We're grateful to be able to tape this here. We've been wanting to have this conversation, but I thought, if we're going to do this, we might as well do it at a show. And why? Because we're here and we're weary, because we're tired, because we didn't get to sleep as much as everybody else. Well, actually, nobody in our family's probably slept enough, and we've been hitting some of these shows hard this summer, but this is kind of we're also like in our element, like this is what we love. But this is not always glamorous, is it? There are a lot of jobs when it comes to being a stock show mom that are not very pretty. What is your least favorite?
Oh, goodness. I feel like this is the most appropriate show to ask that question, because it's picking out those dang green shavings out of socks. Every time we come home from the show, it's just laundry everywhere with those little green shavings everywhere. But, that reminds us that to be thankful that we have laundry to do, because that means we have kids that are showing, and to be grateful for that. But I would definitely say, the laundry at the end of the shows is probably my least favorite. All the flare jeans that you have to kind of power wash to before you could even think about putting them in the washer. Those are probably just two of my least favorite jobs.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
I there's something about the laundry that's like really rewarding, though, that I'm like, look, I got this stain out and I've got these ready to roll for the next show, and it feels like I've really accomplished something. What I really hate is like unpacking the coolers and the tubs of all this stuff and shaking it out and trying to clean it and disinfect it and thinking, why am I doing this? I'm just going to take it to another county fair. So I don't really like that cleaning of all those things. Laundry is kind of a bit of an escape for me, because I'm like, oh yeah, I got to go do all this laundry and do all this ironing. I'll see you later and go watch my favorite show while I'm ironing. Shh, don't tell anybody. They probably won't listen anyway. But I mean, I don't love that. They're all out in the barn and they're doing all the really hard jobs, but I'm also like, it's not really that fun to be stuck in the air-conditioned house doing the mundane jobs of cleaning the tubs, but they need clean, don't they?
That's right. That's right. I love it.
Well, I think that there's a lot of valuable lessons that our kids get when they come to these shows. And I know that we've learned a lot of those lessons together as families together, watching each other go through some of those ups and those downs. I mean, inevitably one of our kids is going to have a great day and the other one's going to have a hard day. And I think that is just part of stock shows. And this morning I was walking with my husband and I said, man, it's so fun when things go your way. And it's so frustrating when you see your kids hurt. So talk to me a little bit about What do you think is one of the most valuable lessons that you've learned from showing livestock with your family?
Oh man, it's hard. It really is hard to put it down to one to one thing because
fair.
kids teach you humility, raising animals teach you humility. So I guess I would say, um, humility, because I saw something the other day, and it was a picture of a house, and it was just a long row of hydrangea bushes, and hydrangeas are really pretty even without the flowers. They're big green, pretty leaves. But she was discouraged because there was only one bloom on that whole row of bushes, and she said, "I've been fertilizing them all the same way. I've been watering them all the same way. They've all been tended to the same way, but I'm only getting one bloom on that bush." And it's you can relate the same thing to the industry that we're in. We're not going to just dig out all the bushes and plant something else. You know what I mean? We're going to keep at it. We're going to keep going. And sometimes when we've got these kids that have big goals, which is great, and they're showing pigs, and there's a lot of stress, and there's a lot of competitiveness, and a lot of goals being made, and you're doing the right things. You're walking them all the same. You're feeding them all the same. You're doing all the right things, but you're just not getting those blooms. It's just teaching kids, again, do not grow weary and do not give up. You just got to keep doing the next right thing. And, someday you might have some more blooms, from all those bushes. So I think it's just, learning to keep things in perspective is a valuable lesson. Living in your current season is valuable because sometimes the season that you're in that works this year might not work next year. Even comes down to like a hotel room. You know what I mean? This year we might all fit in the hotel room and everything's great. And the next year you come back, your kids have grown, they're all teenagers, they're taking longer in the bathroom, and all of a sudden a hotel room's not going to work anymore. So you got to move up to a suite or an Airbnb. And so just being able to like change and adapt and edit as you go, because there's not always, one right answer. It's always going to look different for different families. It's going to look different for different seasons that you're in. So both.
Yeah, and not to belabor the disappointments, because there's certainly so many joys. But I've also, the older I get, the more I realize that I am grateful that we get to walk through disappointments together, because last year my oldest went off to college, and all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute. What if something bad happens to her? And goodness, what if she's disappointed? What if I can't help her walk through the hard stuff, right? And I mean, I wasn't able to walk her through the hard stuff like I used to before. And so, but I can look back at these shows and I can think, gosh, we've went through a lot of highs and we went through lows together, and we did it together as a family at these shows. And I think there's a lot of value that kids get from the disappointments that livestock projects can inevitably present, right? Because animals die.
Yep.
They get sick. Your best one cracks a pad right before the show. I mean, just things happen. So any insight on how you've been able to coach your kids to get through disappointments and how to come out of that on the other side?
Sure. And I will be the first to admit that I'm not perfect at doing this. Like I said, none of us know what we're doing. We just try to do the next right thing in front of us. But it does remind me of a story that we went through personally a few years ago. Michaela was, 13 or 14. And Hamps have always been her favorite breed. She has loved the Hampshire breed. And we finally had, Hamp in the barn. That was the best one that we had yet. We had big dreams for it. It was third Hamp at Expo, but our end goal was the Indiana State Fair. And that's what we were feeding to. And, we were in a season, everything was going right. She was looking really good. And we thought, okay, we finally got one dialed in. And about a week before the State Fair, I'll never forget, Craig and Michaela walked in from the barn, and I could tell there was something wrong, Woo, I'm going to get teary.
Me too.
And, he said she shucked her hair. And at that moment, when pigs decide to lose hair, there's really nothing you can do. There's no Band-Aid you can put on that. There's no plan B. It is what it is. And she had a thin belt to begin with. And so we had some hard conversations of, what does this look like? We had hard conversations of what's the right thing to do, because ultimately, we're in this industry to teach our kids the right things to do. And, we had to just sit down and say, okay, if this is what happens, this is how we're going to handle it. And she went through breed checks at State Fair. Craig was working that day, so it was she and we went through the breed checks, and Clay Zilling was doing the breed checks that day. And he kind of just looked at the belt, and then he looked at us, and I just knew, my ears, my ears, my eyes got a little watery, and we knew that she wasn't going to pass the breed check. And so we walked out of that ring, and, we had another conversation of we have to have a shift in perspective, because in this moment, sure, we've got a show now as a crossbred instead of a ham. So that changes what our intentions were. But that was also the week that there was a family who had some teenagers that were coming down to the state fair, and they had an awful wreck on the Interstate 65. And so in that moment, here we were complaining that we weren't passing a breed check, but there was another family just down the road that were fighting for their life in the hospital. And so as hard as it was to say, okay, this is what we really wanted, we also have to think about, keeping the big things, and having a heart of contentedness. And, I talk to my kids a lot about, sometimes it's your turn and sometimes it's not your turn. And in that moment of the state fair, it wasn't Michaela's turn. And instead, she had a front row seat to the Hampshire show. It wasn't from the middle of the ring like she wanted, but she sat on the front row and watched that Hampshire show. And, those are the moments that puts that drive and desire in your heart of being so close and knowing you were so close to getting that goal. So that makes you want to come back and try again, and someday it'll be your turn. But today that wasn't our turn. And, in every show, that's why we have a pig show. You know what I mean? If Jennifer Scheich won every single pig show, there wouldn't be a need to have another pig show, because we know Jennifer was going to win. But a different pig show is a different judge and a different day. And so that's why we do what we do, because there's, the light of a new day. And so I don't know. So I don't have the perfect answer, but, we just try to talk about sometimes it's your turn and sometimes it's not your turn. And to be happy for those when it is their turn, because you would want the same for yourself. So.
Well, and those stories are so hard, right? Like, as I look back over, I don't know, the last 25 years and think about, all the memories that, I had in NJSA when I was running shows, and had the inside track of like, this kid's pig didn't even make it to the show. Like, something happened on the trailer and we lost a pig, or, kids who didn't make it in for situations like yours. I mean, those are hard things that do happen, and framing your perspective, that's super good advice. And I hope people hear that, because I think one of the challenges is, as parents, we lead the way on that. And that's where my husband and I sometimes have to do a little double check, like, hey, you're frustrated, so I'm going to take over and you just go walk away right now.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know if you guys ever have to do that. Probably not. Probably that's just a Scheich problem. But anyway, we sometimes have moments where, that's the nice thing about being able to parent together, is that when one of us kind of struggles, the other can step up. And the reality is that there are a lot of struggles, but there are a lot of joys. And
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I was thinking about this too, that like showing livestock today is a lot different than we were in kids. In the 90s, back in the good old days, I just felt like, you could kind of spend a little bit of time with some of your livestock at home. And admittedly, I think horses are different than this. But I mean, I just feel like this livestock show industry has become pretty darn intense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that higher level of competition is so cool. And the amount of time that, your kids spend in the barn working at it is pretty impressive. Like, I'll admit there's a lot of people in our lives who don't understand how many hours that our kids spend in the barn. And it's a sacrifice, right? They miss out on things. How do you deal with that as a parent? Like, kind of that hard lesson of sometimes you're not going to be able to get to do what you want to do with your friends on a weekend because we need to stay here and it's hot, like your pigs need rinsed. I feel like we're in that throes of teenagerness where it sometimes is hard to be responsible, but
it is. Yeah. That's really hard because, there's so many things, that they can be doing. Like you said, there's so many things that they could be choosing to do. And, at the end of the day, it's the kids that are showing the pigs. I tell my kids a lot, I've already done 4-H, I've already done the things that I want to do. And this is your turn, and so if the pig doesn't get walked that day, it's not my project, you know. But so yeah, I don't have a super great answer for that, but I think as long as they're choosing to do something that they enjoy, I feel like those are the times that you have to do less of the prodding, less of the nagging. Like if it's something that they really enjoy doing, they're going to go out and get it done. Sometimes when you're trying to force them to do something, maybe that's not their level of interest as much as you want it to be. And so it makes things a little bit tougher. So yeah, I just try to keep that in perspective of, I've already lived by a childhood, so it's their turn to do what they want to do.
And speaking of living our childhood, I mean, we did it in a different way too. That's a lot different than what our kids face today. So I know that we've talked about this before, that the environment and the climate that they're showing livestock in and living in period today is challenging. What do you think is some of the biggest concerns that you have about kind of like growing up in the stock show industry today, but what gives you hope?
Sure. There's a lot of things that give me hope, and I know that there's a lot of families that are raising kids the right way and keeping the big things the big things. And I heard a quote the other day from Shauna Niequist that I really latched onto, and she said, "You can compare, and you can connect, but you cannot do both." And I think that so many kids, when they're pulling up the social media highlight reel, they're seeing all the wins, they're seeing all the kids that are having success at all the shows across the nation. And, that wasn't a thing when we were a kid. We saw who won the opening show when we were there that day in living color, And so the kids today are constantly seeing everyone's highlight reel. So it's easy for them in that moment to just stop and compare themselves. I'm never going to be like them. I'm never going to win this show. But also, again, reframing that perspective of connection instead, and how can I connect with that person? And I even think related to a show mom perspective of, you see the mom, she's got it all going on, and you think, man, how on earth did she have time to make Rice Krispie treats before this show, And you can either in that moment compare yourself of like, I'm never going to be good enough, or you can walk over to her and say, man, where on earth did you find the time to make these Rice Krispie treats? And she'll probably surprise you and say, oh, I never make those. It's always my mother-in-law, And so I think you just have to choose to just help your kids refocus that, to just not take that comparing standpoint, but just to always find other ways that they can truly connect. Because I think there's a lot of disconnect as far as being friends on social media, but have you ever actually had a conversation with that person? Do you really know anything more than what you're seeing on a screen about that person? So yeah, just choosing in that moment to connect versus comparing.
I love that. It reminds me of a story last week. We were at another show last week, and I listened to a mom recount kind of an example of another show mom that she had seen in passing before at shows, and she's like, she just always looked kind of grumpy.
Are you talking about me?
No, I'm laughing because I'm like, am I talking about myself? Anyway, she's like, she just kind of like look grumpy sometimes, and I didn't really know what to think of her. And she goes, and then, well, this week she just, really, really started talking to me, connecting with me, and man, she's great, and it was just, and it's just silly example that just came to mind, but I do think your point of it's so easy to judge people in the moment or on social media. We don't really know them, and we really need to take that time to get to know people better. And that's one of the things that I really encourage my kids. Like, I know that we're pretty focused on our animals, getting through these contests and doing all the things, but gosh, make time to get to know somebody that you didn't know before you came today, and deepen those friendships with the people that are your lifelong friends. I mean, our daughters and the friendship that they shared, it brings me to tears. Yeah. I think ours is pretty awesome, but theirs is pretty amazing. And the support, and they are each other's biggest fans. And I think that's hard. I think it is hard, as you said, to compare, connect, all of that. How do you cheer people on in life? And I I think this environment has really helped them learn I can be her biggest fan, and that doesn't take anything away from what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah. And, I had a T-shirt made a couple years ago, and I would wear it around. And it's funny, when you're wearing a T-shirt that has words on it, I love it because you can also see the people's faces when they read your T-shirt. And it was just a black and white T-shirt, and the top line said, "You can't compete with me." And so when you read that first line, you think, oh, well, that's kind of proud. That's kind of arrogant, right? And the second line said, "I want you to win too." And when I wore that shirt, it was interesting because it actually confused a lot of people. They were really confused about, oh, what do you mean? Don't you want your kid to win? And I can remember a conversation that I had at the state fair with the dad, and this shirt was really bothering him all day. And he finally came up to me. He's like, "What do you mean? Like, don't you want your kid to win?" And I said, "Absolutely, I want my kid to win." But we all can look around, and if you look at any other kid in this barn, it's not like they just threw their pig on the trailer and decided to come to a show. They have all spent time washing and rinsing and walking and feeding all summer long. All of these kids have put in so many hours of work. And you know what? If your kid gets to win today, I'm going to clap for them and I'm going to be happy for them. And maybe that's not everybody's mentality, but it's about the kids, and just being able to cheer on others because everybody in this barn is, shares that same passion that we have, and they walk the same walk that we walk. And, sometimes that's where, we've talked about this a lot of, your true friendships come in places like this, maybe the kids that your kids go to school with, like they don't know anything about show stock industry. And so sometimes it's hard to relate on some of those things. And so that's what I love about this industry is even though we may see these families a couple times a year at a national show, you have so much in common that it just breeds that common ground of values and interests. And so anyway, that's just one thing that I love about it.
Well, one thing I love to do is to ask people about you. And I feel like I know, I know you pretty well. I know you better than most of my guests, but I still did my research. And this is what one mom has to say. Lindsay Pullen, who is just one of my favorites. I just love her. She was actually on one of my junior boards years ago when I was at NJSA. So I've watched her grow up, and she is a super mom. I think so much of her as a mom. And I reached out to her and I said, "Talk to me about Emily. What do you think about Emily?" And she said, "She's real." And of course, Lindsay, all caps, so I love that.
Okay.
She says, "In real life and on social media, she shows herself and she isn't a persona. She's just authentic." So let's talk about authenticity for just a little bit. What does authenticity mean to you?
That's a great question. And gosh, again, I think it kind of goes back to that field of wildflowers, and just knowing that everybody goes through hard times. Everybody's going through something that you may not know about. And so I think it comes down to a lot of times at these shows, that's what I love about our conversations, Jennifer, is because when I ask you how you're doing, I'm going to get an answer and I'm going to be there for it and I'm going to listen to all of it. It's not "I'm good, how are you?" It's a "tell me more," tell me what you're really going through. And I think that's so important. And so, I love Lindsay and she just makes me laugh. And so I'm thankful she had those kind words, to say about me. So thank you for that.
Well, I think sometimes we need reminded that I don't think as a mom, you really you can't see what you're like as a mom. And so sometimes it's nice to have a little feedback from others. She also mentioned that you are masterful, and I agree with this, of coming up with some of like the best hacks. But the thing that I appreciate about you is that you share those. You don't just keep them to yourself. You are on mission to share all the ways to do this stock show mom in a little bit easier. So tell me, what's one of your favorite hacks? Or if you want to share more, we're here for it.
Well, my favorite hack today was to learn how to tie up your necklaces because I walked out of our Airbnb and realized that I had a giant stain on my shirt. So I just tied up my little necklace a little higher so you can't see it. So that's my tip of the day. Follow me for tips and tricks like that. But honestly, Jennifer, one of the tips I learned from you at these kind of shows is, and I know this sounds silly, but it's really genius, of bringing plastic tubs for your laundry so that when you're in the hotel room and you have a whole pile of stinky clothes, you can put a lid on that sucker and at least preserve some of the smell in the hotel room. So I love that hack that you share about that. But yeah, I think, just, what bad could come from sharing what we know with others? You know what I mean? So that's why I just love sharing tips and tricks. And kind of show the nerdy side of me. I have like 1,000 different notes on my phone, and one of those notes is just a what works, what not works list. And show by show, I'll kind of pop on there and be like, okay, this worked great. This did not work great. How do we change that? How do we make it better for the next time? But yeah, the reality of it is, I'm just winging it. I'm just, try to do the best I can. And a lot of times it's messy, but, we can't learn if we don't ask others what they're doing. And I think that's how we all get to be better people, is just by asking others what have worked for them. Just winging it. That's my best tip, really.
I love it. Well, I also want to make sure I get this in too, because I know we're going to run out of time. But Michaela, your oldest, so I said, tell me why your mom is such a super mom. And she said, okay, yeah, I'll get right back to you. And then it took her a little while to get back to you. She's like, that was hard. And I was like, because there's a lot of things. And so this is a long list, but I'm going to read it because you deserve this. One major reason that our family is able to continue to show at competitive levels is my mom. She takes care of all the planning that would otherwise fall through the cracks. From meal prep to hotel bookings to bringing forgotten clothes, she does it all and has the planning down to a science. She does much of the back work when we go to the shows and always does it with a smile. My mom does a lot of extra driving to make these shows work. At the exposition, she drove back home every night to feed all the livestock at home. Her flexibility with an ever-changing and always busy schedule is probably her superpower. With so many livestock shows packed into a short summer, there's always something at home that needs prep for, and she's the one who we can always count on if time is running short and we need extra hands. And I don't know, maybe I'm just also sharing with you the tears of Michaela's going to college in the fall too. But that made me get a little weepy-eyed, because there's a lot to unpack there. But I think if I were to summarize it, your flexibility and your ability to be flexible with a smile, that is a superpower. I do not possess that superpower. I'm like, I'm feeling stressed and sad. Read it on my face. You're like, I'm feeling stressed and sad, so I'm going to smile. And I love that about you, because it is true. So what helps you stay calm and what helps you stay flexible when things don't go as you planned or originally thought that they should? Because you are a planner. It'd be one thing if you were just fly by the seat of your pants. You are not. You are a planner, but you're a flexible planner.
And I think that's just the way I'm wired. I think part of that, I get that from my dad, of just trying to look for the funny things that happen. And I think, the other thing I heard the other day is, that their childhood is also my motherhood, so their childhood is what they're going to remember of when our family went to a show XYZ. But it's also like, I only get to do this once too. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so really to I don't know, savor those moments. But I really just, in those stressful times, I don't know, it's just my gut reaction to like look for something funny that's happened to like redirect, I guess. Yeah. And so I have also found though, just like when you're trying to teach your kids gratefulness, how do you cultivate a heart from gratefulness? Well, you find things every day that you can be grateful for. The same thing is with negativity. Your heart will breed negativity, and then all of a sudden you're always looking for the terrible things that are happening and the things that are going wrong. And so for me, I just redirect it of, looking for the funny things that are happening, and then all of a sudden you start to see more funny things that are happening. So yeah, just redirection is
I love it. I love it. Because I often think about that. I'm like, what is something like, how do you define Emily? And I do think your humor it's just contagious. I laugh the most around you of anybody that I'm around, because you're constantly smiling and laughing. And my kids talk about that and see that too. And one of the things that I think is so fun is that you have taken that to a bit of an online persona. And I realize that you're not, you've mentioned I don't update perfectly frequently, and that's fine. But
when you do, it's like everybody pay attention because this is going to be some powerful revelations coming through with your funny fair mom. So talk to me about funny fair mom because I love it, and I think you're masterful at how you put your thoughts together. But how did that idea start? And just share a little about that.
Well, honestly, Funny Fair Mom came out of a season of when things weren't going great. I'll be honest with you, and this may be a long answer to your short question, but we had one summer that, we were running hard. We had all 3 kids. We're showing all 3 species, and it was probably June at this point. The new had worn off. Summer break was in full swing of, how it is when you're really doing the hard work in the barn. And all of a sudden, it just wasn't as much fun. And I can remember sitting the kids down on the porch one night after chores because there was a lot of the barn bicker that was happening. I'm sure you can relate. We don't really tolerate.
We don't have any barn bicker at our house.
We don't really tolerate yelling in the barn, but there's a lot of barn bicker that was happening. And, we were just so busy that the wheels weren't falling off, but we were sure hitting a lot of potholes. And if you've driven in Indiana, the potholes can just be super annoying. But anyway, and so we had the conversation with the kids of like, this takes a lot of time showing livestock. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of energy. We could put all that into having a lake house or having a boat. And we probably wouldn't be bickering every weekend if we were sitting on a boat somewhere. So if this is truly what we want to do, how do we enjoy it? And so that was the summer we pivoted, we redirected, we changed some things we were doing. But it also was the same summer that I can remember being in Tractor Supply for like the 18th time that week because Fair Week was next week and they were out of everything because everybody in the county is in Tractor Supply looking for fly spray. And so they were out of everything and I looked over and they had the tower of like t-shirts and they had 4-H t-shirts and I was like, oh, you know what? Right now that could save my life because I don't even have the brain capacity to think about what I'm going to wear next week at the county fair because we don't have any clean laundry. It's going to be 1,000 degrees and I don't have anything that's going to make me look cute. I think I'm just going to buy a few t-shirts. And so I bought a few t-shirts and one of the t-shirts said, "Hide you crazy." And I just laughed out loud because as we all know, in stressful moments at the county fair, sometimes the crazy starts to come out. And so I just wore that shirt and I made kind of a funny post of like, hey everybody, this is your public service announcement. It's Fair Week. Just make sure to tuck in your crazy, And so the next year at the fair, I was like, that worked pretty good. I'm just going to get t-shirts every day this week. And so I found a couple of funny ones and I did kind of a funny post that day. And then the next year, somebody came up to me and was like, hey, are you going to do those funny shirts again? And I was like, well, I don't know. I guess people think this is a thing now. So I'm going to get some more funny shirts. And so that year I would wear a funny shirt and then I would post something funny that happened that day. And it was just all this organic thing that just kind of all happened and developed. And pretty soon I had parents coming up to me saying, your post is the first thing I read before I come to the fair. And it makes me laugh and it gets me through the day. And I was just taken aback because I was like, really? Because I'm just posting like what's actually happening to us that day. And again, it goes back to like when you look for the funny things are going to happen. And so it's kind of just this organic thing of like, all right, well, I'm going to put all this stuff on its own page and call it the Funny Fair Mom because I don't know what else to call it. And it's just kind of gradually over time has grown into what it is. And like I said, I don't plan to understand how any algorithm works or try to make it work. I just kind of post when things are funny. And so I think that helps us to, remind ourselves not to get too competitive and that we really are in this to have fun and, to just take it one day at a time and try to find the fun parts. So, yeah, love it.
And we all love your posts as well and love when we get to be with you in person in the said shirts.
Like prospect.
So I know that we're coming to the end that we need to wrap up. You said this would take 5 hours, and I promised you that, yes, I knew we could talk for 5, but we aren't going to be able to make that work today. So I guess I just want to give you a chance, as you reflect on this time that you guys have been able to spend in the stock show industry, doing this together as a family, is there anything that you might advise to moms who are getting ready to get going? Just what stands out to you as maybe the most important thing that you could share with somebody or pass on?
Yeah, That's a great question. And I don't have a great answer to that. But I think, just always keeping the big things, and the little things, the little things. And I think that's up to you to decide, what are your big things? What are the most important for you as a family? Is it winning a banner? Is it developing character? Is it, enjoying what you're doing? And I think it looks different for every family. But taking that time to decide what it is for your family that means the most and that's the most important, and to try to not let all the other stuff get tangled up and in the way. And Jennifer, I'm just so thankful for you, because you're one that reminds me of accountability and why we do the things we do. And I just love your friendship, because you just pour those words of advice into me every time I talk with you. And I'm just so grateful for that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's mutual. And I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I know our faith is really important to both of us. And while we may not have the time to talk a lot about that here, that's core to what gets us through, right? I don't know how either one of us would survive these summers without that. And I guess I think it's fun that we're in an industry and in a place where we can talk about that, and
Absolutely.
we can just not be afraid to share those things. And I appreciate how you shine that light that you have to other people, whether it's through the Funny Fair Mom shirts or whether it's through all of the other things we didn't get to talk about today that you do so well. You really are a great example of being a mom who just takes one step at a time and tries to get better every day. And I think you're doing a pretty awesome job at it. So thank you so much for joining us today on the Pork Podcast. You can dive into more of the Pork Podcast on Farm Journal's YouTube channel or anywhere that podcasts are found. Again, this is Jennifer Scheich, finding the story behind the story.